All right, here we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live with Mishnah Mastery. It is a pleasure to see you all here tonight. We are hoping to plow through 3 chapters tonight, all being well. That is the aim. That should keep Mark happy, if not for a little while at least. So we are going to try and go through chapter 13, 14, and 15 of Masechet Shabbat tonight. Pardon me? No, that wasn't an interruption. Okay, not an interruption. That wasn't a question, I should say. All right, so here we go. Mishnah chapter 13. It should be up on the screen. Is it up on your screens? Give us a thumbs up if you can see it there.
Yes.
Top stuff. All right, so we are going to be talking about, if you recall, we've been trying to ascertain what the minimum requirement is to violate different malachot. So we've seen a bunch of different things in the last couple of weeks, and tonight Rabbi Eliezer is going to tell us, in his opinion, how much weaving one would have to do to be violating the malacha of oreg, of weaving on the Sabbath. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ha'oreg shlosha chutin batchila ve'echad al ha'arig chayav. Now, if we think for a second about how weaving works, we have what seems to be called the warp and the woof. In Hebrew, the shasi and the arev. Right. So, if we think for a second, let's just imagine these are vertical strands, and then to weave, one gets the horizontal strand and goes in and out and in and out and in and out. So, says Rabbi Eliezer, in order to be violating the malacha, you would have to be essentially weaving 3 rows, azoi, before you are violating the malacha of oreg. Continues the Mishnah, v'chachamim omrim, bein b'tchila bein basof shir shnei chutim. But the sages say whether at the beginning or whether at the end, whether it's the first stitches or whether you're adding stitches to things that already exist, the standard would be 2 threads, 2 weaving fulls of thread, of weaving. There you go. That's a tongue twister. Mishnah base, ha'osa shnei bate nirin banirin. All right, now, we mentioned that this is one of the 39 malachas. But what doesn't help is our lack of familiarity with the loom process. So, for the benefit of our thousands of viewers at home, never get this right, can I? That is a rough approximation of a loom, and the loops over here through which the threads would be directed, those are called bate nirin. Those are they don't have such a great English translation, really, apart from loops. So the Mishnah says, "Ha'osa shnei bate nirin banirin." A person who makes 2 of these loops. Where am I? Banirin on one of these looms, or bekerus, or if they are making a sifting instrument that would be made of palm. So the way in which that they would need that to be is by weaving different bits of the material together. Or banafa, if he's making a sieve, a sifter, bakavra, a sieve, uvasal, if he's making a basket, chayav. So in other words, if he starts to weave these wicker baskets or these different types of weaving, these different utensils that are made through the process of weaving, if he completes 2 loops of those, then he will be chayav, he will be liable. V'hatofesh shtei tefiros, if he sews 2 stitches, v'hakorea al manaslit for shtei tefiros, or he rips enough material to be able to sew in 2 stitches, then he will be chayav according to the Mishnah. Continues in Mishnah Gimel, ha'korea b'chamasov al meisov. If a person tears out of anger, or tears out of grief and sorrow for a dead person. And anything which is done in a destructive manner, and not look because they are looking to build, not because they are looking to create, but they are destroying in that sense. Says the Mishnah Paturin, they will be exempt. Mahamakalkel al-manas detake. But if you were destroying because you were intending to repair, then shiurok mitake. Then the amount that you would have to destroy would have to be similar to the amount that if you were building something or creating something or crafting something, then you would be liable for that size. So these are only short Mishnahs, and that's why if we're lucky, we will be able to really crunch down and get through a lot of material tonight. Continues in Mishnah Daled, Mishnah 4, Shi'ur Hamlabain. How much would you have to be bleaching? How much wool would you have to be bleaching before you are liable? Vahamanapets, or how much would you be combing? Vahatsoveya, or dyeing, Vahatove, or spinning. How much would you have to be doing of those things to the wool before you would reach a point of being chayev? Says the Mishnah, Kimlo Rochav Hasit Kaful. Enough of a distance which is twice that width, or as the picture book also tells me, that length, which apparently is twice as long as that. I haven't actually measured that with a ruler, but that is a sit, the distance between those two fingers, and that is a sit kaful, a double-sized thumb to the index finger. So if you were to work with wool, either by bleaching or by spinning or by combing or by dyeing, that amount of wool, says the Mishnah, you will be chayav. And if you were to weave 2 strings, shiurokim lo hasit, then you would be chayav again. Well, not again, but you would be chayav for that width. Kim lo hasit, the amount of a sit. And look at that, beautiful. It just translates it as a sit. That is so helpful if you know what it's talking about. Okay, continues in Mishnah Hey. I actually used Safaria to translate Yigdal for our this is how we do it shir last night, and I gave up halfway through and resorted to the green siddur because some of the translations just didn't do full justice to the words. Anyway, that's free material for you. Sometimes you get what you pay for. Mishnah Hey. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we are going to be talking now about trapping. What we're not allowed to trap on Shabbos, but at what point does it become a matter of liability, of violating? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hatzad Tzipor Lamigdal. If you are trapping a bird in a migdal, which is some kind of tall, narrow hut, tower structure that you would use for storing birds, perhaps, utzvi labais, or you are trapping a deer into a house, says Rabbi Yehuda, you will be chayav. Chachamim omrim sipor lamigdal. If you are trapping a bird in a migdal, or utzvi labais lechaser v'labivarim, or you are trapping a deer into a house or a courtyard, or again, what on earth is a corral, people? It's some kind of enclosure for keeping animals. If you have ever heard of that word corral, you're a better man than I. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Lo kol habevarim shavim. Not all corrals, not all enclosures are the same, which is why Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel aims here to clarify the words of the Chachamim. This is what the Chachamim mean when they say trapping a tzvi in a bivar, in one of these enclosures. Zeh haklal, mechusat tzida patur. If you, it's all going to depend on whether they are trapped or not. Meaning as follows. If you put them in a place where you would need to still kind of lunge after them when they're inside that enclosure, then you're going to be patur, because there's more work to do to be able to make it considered trapped. But if there is no more work to be done once you have it into that enclosure, then that will be the act of trapping that you will be violating the malacha over. So I hope that is somewhat clear. But if not, then the next Mishnah or two should help us to understand this further. Mishnah Vav. Tzvi shenichnas labayis. If a deer wandered into your house of its own accord, is that trapped or not? Well, that depends. So v'na'al echad b'fanav, and then someone goes and shuts the door on the deer, trapping it inside the house. Says the Mishnah, chayav, you will be liable. When it walked into your house, it could get out again. It was only trapped because you went and locked the door. Nalu shnayim. However, if two people close the door together, put her in, then they will be exempt. Why would they be exempt? Because we have seen, even as early as the first Mishnah of this whole Masechta, that if two people do the work of one person, they will not violate the melacha. However, as we're about to see, if two people do the work that could only be done with two people, then they would be chayav. So let's see how the Mishnah rolls. Lo yachol echad linol v'na'alu shnayim chayavin. If the door could not be closed, it was too heavy, it was too big, and it could not be closed by one person alone, v'na'alu shnayim, and two people close it together, chayavin, then they will both be liable because they have done a melacha which could not have been done by one person. So that is why they are liable. Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon says that they would be patur. However, as I have a little note here, the halacha would not side like Rabbi Shimon. So in fact, if two people do a melacha that could only be done by two people, I believe the din would be that they are chayav. If one person was to somehow miraculously do the work of two people, then I seem to recall seeing there that they might be patur, but I don't quote me on that. Anyway, we continue with Mishnah Zayin. Yashav ha'echad ala pesach velo milahu. You got one person who is sitting at a doorway, but he is not filling the entire width of that doorway. Yashav hasheni umilahu, and then a second person comes and sits next to him. Hasheni chayav. The second person is going to be liable for having trapped the animal inside, because beforehand the animal could still get out, and it's only because of the second guy that the animal is now trapped inside. So that is why only the second guy would be liable. Yashav harishon ala pesach umilahu. The first person comes and sits down, and he is blocking the whole entranceway. So the animal is trapped inside. Uvah hasheni v'yashav b'tzidon. And the second guy comes and sits down next to him. Even if the first person stands up and walks away, the first guy is going to be liable, and the second guy is going to be patur. Why? Because it was the first guy that did the original action of the original violation of trapping the animal. What can this be compared to? This can be compared to a situation where a person closes his house to protect it, and it finds out that a deer is actually on the inside, and meaning that he wouldn't have realized it when he closed the door. So it was already trapped inside, it was already in there. And therefore, if he was to then close the door, he would not be chayiv to that action because the animal was already trapped inside. Mazel tov on completing chapter 13, and we roll on to chapter 14 miraculously. Look at that, a whole perek in 14 minutes. There we go. So we are going to be extending or talking further about the laws of trapping. And what we're going to be talking about here are certain species that would be normally trapped either for food or for medicine. And we're going to be talking about other species who are not trapped for any purpose. And if a species is not trapped for any purpose, then you are not going to be chayav for tzeda. So let's take a little look inside and see how that all pans out. Sometimes I'm just relying on my notes and hoping that what I read out from my notes actually correlates to the Mishnah that we're going to see. So let's take a look. It says Mishnah Aleph. Shmona shiratzim ha'amurim b'Torah. There are 8 creepy crawlies that are talked about in the Torah. And they are mentioned, I think, in Parshas Shmini, I want to say. That's things like weasels, and that's things like rats and mice and these kinds of things. I've got a list somewhere with the 8 things. Maybe I'll get them over here. No, that's good. That's called preparation, guys. Anyway, have a look at Parashas Shmini, and you will find there the list of the 8 creepy, crawly, icky animals and rodents. Pardon? Yeah, man, let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Rubenstein.
Weasel, mouse, toad, hedgehog, or porcupine, type of lizard, another type of lizard, snail, and a mole.
There we go. So the Shmona Shratzim that are mentioned in the Torah, Hatzadan va'achovel bahen chayav, a person who traps them, or a person who wounds them, bringing their blood up to the surface and bruising them, they are going to be chayav for that. However, says the Mishnah, ushart shkatzim uramashim, other types of creepy crawlies and abominable creatures, hachovel bahen patur. If you were to wound them, bruise them, then you would be patur. Says the Mishnah, Hatzadan l'tzorech chayav. If you are trapping them for a need, you are going to be liable. Shelo l'tzorech patur. If you have no need for them, you are going to be patur. Chayav ba'of shebirushuso. If you have got an animal or a chicken in your property, so they are domesticated, then hatzadan patur. Then you are not going to be liable for closing the door on them, for trapping them. But you would be liable for bruising them, for wounding them. So in case you're wondering how you could ever shut the front door to your house if your dog is inside, that is the reason why. Because if they are domesticated and they're not necessarily going to try and run away and escape if you open the door, then you are not going to be liable for trapping them in your house. Continues the Mishnah in Mishnah base, where we are now going to be switching and talking about refuah, talking about different treatments and cures, which we're going to see are permitted biblically, but the rabbis go the extra mile and they put a safeguard in place, and they say that different treatments and medicines can be forbidden. Why? Because people may come to grind medication, and that would be forbidden. So what we're going to see over here is that the underlying principle is if we allow you to do something which is fundamentally permitted, you may come to do something which is fundamentally prohibited. So that is the background to all of this. And it's going to depend heavily on whether the person is ill, not on the status of the medicine. Because if a person is not ill, then we'll see that some medicines are actually permitted. So let's take a look inside. Mishnah base. Ein osin hilmi b'Shabbos. A person is not allowed to make a brine concoction on Shabbos. Well, is that what it translates in there? Yes, it is. Brilliant. So it's a very intense salt water concoction. And you wouldn't be allowed to make it because it might look like you're preparing a mixture to be able to tan your animal skins, because that's part of the process, is putting it into a very salty mixture. So that is why the Mishnah starts off by saying you're not allowed to make this stuff on Shabbos. Aval osehu esmei hamelach v'tovel bahen pito v'nosei l'socha tavshil. But you are allowed to make a salt water dip to be able to dip your bread into, or to put it into your cooked dish. You would be able to make that kind of concoction. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi tells us that it's the amount that you're making that's the problem. So So if you're making a huge amount, then maybe you've got a problem, because then it's going to look like you're processing hides. But if not, then it might be a different case altogether. Amar Rabbi Yossi, v'halahu hilmi vein meruba vein muat. So Rabbi Yossi says, but when it comes to this brine, it's going to depend on whether you're making a lot or you're making a little. So this is what the salt water mixture is that you're allowed to make. If you were to put the oil first and then add the salt and the water, then you're not going to run into this problem of getting it confused with a mixture that is for tanning your animal hides. And it's going to be clear that you're making a solution to be able to use for your dips, for your challah, for your pita bread, or whatever it is. And so according to Rabbi Yossi, it is going to very much depend on how you are processing this mixture. Continues, Mishnah Gimel. Ein ochlin ezovin b'Shabbos. A person is not allowed to eat ezovin on Shabbos. What? Oh, that's interesting. It's two words. Ezov yon. Oh, I have it as one word. Ein ochlin ezov yon b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to eat this. They translate it here as Greek hyssop. It seems to be a type of grass that was eaten to kill tapeworms. So why should you not be allowed to eat this? Because healthy people would not ordinarily eat this type of food. Meaning the only reason you would be eating this is if you had a particular ailment like killing off tapeworms, and so you were using this as a medicinal treatment. And since you can't do that on Shabbos, the Mishnah tells us that you can't eat this stuff. However, says the Mishnah, however, you would be allowed to consume yoezer, which apparently kills worms in a person's liver, and you would be allowed to drink abuv roeh, and you would be allowed to drink this mixture, this herbal mixture that would help with a snake bite. And that is because healthy people would also have these types of foods. They wouldn't just be used exclusively for medicine. Anything that gets eaten by people for curing, and anything that gets drunk for refuah, with the exception of the water of palm trees, the chos ikarim, and a potion of roots, because they are for jaundice. So we seem to be saying that anything that gets eaten normally and anything that gets drunk normally, you would be able to have it on Shabbos for refuah. So let's say you got a sore throat and you want to make yourself a cup of honey and lemon tea. Because people would normally drink honey and lemon tea, you would be allowed to drink that on Shabbos. Even if you're drinking it for curing yourself, because it's not strictly speaking a medicine, you will be allowed to have it on Shabbos. But the exception over here is water of palm trees and a potion of roots, because they are not consumed usually in a normal way. They are used only for curing different things. Interestingly, I've translated Euroka as hepatitis, not as jaundice. So there you go. We've got a machlokes in my notes. So we continue with the Mishnah of Al Shosa, who made the kalim litzma'ah. However, a person is allowed to drink palm water if he is really, really thirsty. The sach shemen, and he's allowed to anoint with shemen ikarin, the oil of roots, shalol le'refuah. It is not for a medicinal purpose. So there we go. Continues the Mishnah in Mishnah Daled. HaChoshesh b'shinav, a person with toothache. Lo yigama b'henes hachobetz. He is not allowed to wash his mouth out with vinegar. Because it would seem that people would used to wash their mouth out in that way. You used to, swish it around and then spit it out afterwards. So a person with toothache should not do that on Shabbos. Aval metabel hu kadarka, but he is allowed to put bread in the vinegar in the usual manner. V'im nisrape, and then by kind of chewing on it and then maybe spitting it out after, whatever they would be doing, since there's an element of eating involved in a normal fashion. If he ends up getting cured on account of it, gesundheit, Hachoshesh b'masnav, a person with pain in his thighs, lo yasuch yain v'chometz, should not smear a mixture of wine and vinegar. Sorry, not a mixture. Should not rub his thighs or his hips, as it translates it over there on the screen, with wine or with vinegar, not when they're mixed together. I'm sorry. Should not use wine or vinegar as a soothing ointment to smear on yourself, and that's because people don't usually do that unless it's for healing themselves. And since you can't use it as a treatment, you wouldn't be allowed to do it on the Sabbath. But you are allowed to smear some oil on yourself, but not rose oil, because that is very expensive, and regular people would only use rose oil apparently if they were ill. They wouldn't resort to that as their normal oil of choice. However, says the Mishnah, B'nei Melachim sachin shemen vered al makosehen. However, royalty, princes, may anoint themselves with rose oil on their wounds because they've got loads of money. She'ein darkam lasuch b'chol, because it is their practice. Sorry, she'kein darkam. It is their way of doing it during the week as well. They've got the money for it, so why not? If you can afford it, flaunt it. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says something that we've actually seen him say before. Kol Yisrael b'nei Melachim hein. All of Israel are royalty, and therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, because we are all royalty of Hashem, we should all be allowed to use rose oil if we need to treat our injuries with it. However, it would seem that the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. Mazel tov on completing the 14th chapter of Masechet Shabbos. 27 minutes in, guys. We are rocking and rolling. Who says that we don't know how to have a good time? Here we go with chapter 15, Perek Tes Vav, where we're going to now be talking about tying knots. Elu kisharim shechayavim aleihem. What we need to bear in mind for chapter 15, by the way, or at least for the beginning over here, there's two kinds of knots. There is a kesher shel kayama. There is an enduring knot, something that is quite permanent in its nature. And that is the big problem with kosher. Not kosher, but kosher. Tying knots on Shabbos. The problem is making knots of permanence, which is why we'll see, or as we see in practical applications of this halacha, to tie a shoelace with a single knot is going to be allowed because it's not permanent. Tying your shoelace with a double knot, because that has an element of permanence to it. And so there you go. For those of you who have said that we don't get to the practical applications of all of these halachas, there you go. There's an easy one for you. And the second type is Eino Shel Kayama, one that is not permanent. We're going to see, though, that is still forbidden if it has a semblance of permanence. And then there's another type, which is basically a temporary kind of knot, which is very easy to untangle and is clearly not meant for anything, securing anything in place. These are the knots for which a person is liable. Kesher hagamalim v'kesher hasapanim. Camel drivers' knots and sailors' knots, which are extremely tough and durable kinds of knots. They are going to be the kind of knot that you cannot tie on the Sabbath. In the same way that you are guilty, liable for having tied them, you will also be chayav for untying them. Rabbi Meir Omer, kol kesher shehu yachol latiro ba'achas miyadav ein chayavim alav. Rabbi Meir says any knot which you would be able to untie with one hand, you will not be liable for it. So even if it has a kind of semi-permanence to it, according to Rabbi Meir, if it was made as a permanent knot, but you would be able to untie it with one hand, he would say that you are not chayav. Continues with Mishnah base. Yesh lecha kisharim she'ein chayavim aleihem Kekesher hagamalin or kekesher hasapanim. There are some knots which you are not liable, even if they are like a camel driver's knot or a sailor's knot. Kosheres isha mafteach chaluka. If you are tying a knot to what does it say over here? A woman may tie up the opening of her chemise, her blouse, if that's what a chemise is. I'm seeing some nods, so I'm clearly not massively ignorant. So a woman may tie the opening of her garment, her blouse, the chute savacha, and she may tie the strings of her hairnet, the shel psikya, and she may tie her girdle, her belt. Or at suras minav sandal, she can tie her shoelaces, her sandal laces. But nodos yain v'shemen, she can close her flasks of oil or wine. Ukadera shel basar, and she can close her meat dishes. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Kosherin lifnei habehema bishvil shelo teitzeh. You may tie a knot, tie a rope in front of an animal that it may not go out, to prevent it from going out. Kosherin deli b'psikya. You may tie a bucket of psikya with a belt of Allah b'chebel, but not with a rope. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda would permit this. Klal Omar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda has a general rule when it comes to these things. Kol kesher she'eno shel kayama ein chayavin alav. If you are not tying a knot, I like that. If you're not tying a knot for permanence, you will not be chayav, says Rabbi Yehuda. Continues with Mishnah Gimel. We are going to be getting on to the halachas of libun, of laundering. So here comes Mishnah Gimel. Mekaplin esakelin afilu arba'a v'chamisha pa'amin. A person may fold clothing or blankets and things like that, even 4 or 5 times. If it was either because you're trying to get the folding perfect. Okay. Umatziin esamitos milele Shabbos to Shabbos, and you are allowed to make beds on the eve of Shabbos because you're going to be using it on Shabbos. Avallo mishabbos l'matzoi Shabbos. You're not allowed to make beds on Shabbos if you are only intending to use it after Shabbos, which is this is all part of the origin for the people that don't fold their talis along the usual lines on a Shabbos. We actually see the Gemara fleshes it out and defines 4 conditions to be able to permit folding something on Shabbos. Number 1, if it is a new item, and so there is no kind of pre-existing creases that you have to fold it along, then that would be okay. If it is white, apparently, if I recall that is part of it, because folding colored garments is considered a substantial enhancement. If it is one person in an item that needs 2 people, since 2 people will do a more professional job than one person, then there are ways in which it would be permitted for one person. And number 4, it can't be that you are folding it for use after Shabbos, because we're not allowed to do preparatory work for after Shabbos. So there are further conditions than what we see presented in the Mishnah, and that is why you'll find people don't fold their talis along the regular creases on a Shabbos. I
was taught that if you fold it the reverse way from the way that you normally do it, then that was the way around.
That's right. That's right. You won't see people folding it the same way as they would during the week. And that the reason is because of that first crease. It's the way it's supposed to be folded. But if you deviate and you fold it in a different way, then it would be allowed on Shabbos. Continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael Omer. Rabbi Yishmael says, A person is allowed to fold clothing and make the bed. By the way, the whole thing about making the bed, if you have anyone in the house who is going to be extremely upset and is going to ruin their Shabbos if the bed is not made, then one can make the bed. Useful, helpful to know. Continues Rabbi Shmuel. A person is allowed to fold clothing, allowed to make the bed on Yom Kippur for use on Shabbos. Which means that Yom Kippur is falling on a Friday. So even though the halachas of Shabbos apply on Yom Kippur as well, since we are not preparing it for a weekday, we're preparing it still for Shabbos. That is why, according to Rabbi Shmuel, you will be allowed to do it on Shabbos. I actually have a note here. We never have Friday Yom Kippur into Shabbos, but once upon a time we did. And the fat pieces of the sacrifices could be offered on, and the fat pieces of the Shabbos offering may be offered on Yom Kippur. Okay, but not the pieces of Yom Kippur on Shabbos. That's not even in. It's not translated over there, but it's in the Hebrew. Fine. Rabbi Akiva says, "Lo shel Shabbos karevim b'Yom Kippurim, v'lo shel Yom Kippurim karevim b'Shabbos." The pieces that you would offer up on Shabbos may not be offered on Yom Kippur, nor may those that would be offered on Yom Kippur be offered on Shabbos. You have to do it on their days. You can't wait to be able to do it. And that is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And the halacha seems to be like Rabbi Akiva. Mazel Tov, completing chapter 15 of Maseches Shabbos. We've only been going 37 minutes, but I haven't taken a look at the next chapter. So better to be safe than sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We've gone through 3 parakim there, and that's all for tonight. So we will see you all next week as we continue with the world of Mishnayos, Maseches Shabbos, chapter 16. Take care, everybody.